good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Today on the Process Pros, I have with me Chris Ben over in New Zealand and Ranjit Ramcharandaran.
You can just have Rajit.
Ranjit, thanks, man.
That's
Over
a
in
tongue twister in the name.
the tongue twister, up in Singapore. Thanks for chatting with me today, guys. Um, as the title suggests in the event, like the rise of the citizen developer. Now, there's a lot of, I guess, discussion around what is a citizen developer, and I think a lot of people have got different ideas about what a citizen developer is. Is it someone who can kind of code? Is it someone in the IT department? Is it someone who has no coding experience in whatsoever and just likes to puddle around in Excel to build out macros? Chris, what is your definition of a citizen developer?
My definition of a citizen developer, Stolly, is probably, well, actually, let's start with a really negative definition. A negative definition could be somebody who gets their hands on some tools and then causes havoc everywhere. Now, if I rewind that, where does the actual phrase citizen development come from? I think it comes from a set of technologies that have made people's lives easier to be able to develop solutions. So, therefore, it's not necessarily a citizen, it could still be a professional developer, but they are using a set of tools that makes their jobs easier and faster to deliver the products. Now, because those tools are so easy to use, then we do get a wider range of people using them. So I have seen anybody from a professional developer all the way through to business analysts and subject matter experts delivering solutions with these new capabilities that they have available to them. How about you, Ranjit? It was like that's kind of my definition of citizen development, but how about for you?
I think it is very much in line with what you've just said, Chris. It's majorly so. If you ask me, I think they are more like a persona who are not, or maybe they are not from a technical background, but still they are able to get hands-on some sort of low-code, no-code solutions and build something uh, quite easily, so that they don't have to run to the procurement, release a tender, find the right vendor, wait for years and years for the application to be released. They just get on it, program it, and get it rolling.
Yeah, and we are live too. So if anyone's watching at the moment and you've got your own definition of what you think a citizen developer is, feel free to chop them into the comments, and we can certainly bring those up as well. Now, you speak about some of these tools that are sort of filtering into organizations. Is this a case of shadow IT, where it's become so easy to buy some of these tools that IT is no longer buying these things and thus not having any knowledge of them? And is there a risk of, this shadow IT notion of and citizen developers being able to build things in an organization that have very much the possibility of becoming mission critical, and they're not being backed up, and they're not being done in best use cases, and they're not using the right data sources that are connected to the right systems, because there's no overview or governance around what's actually happening. Is that a big concern for organizations?
I'd suggest that yes, it is, but you've also hit the nail on the head with the word governance. So, let's rewind the tape 20 years ago, and we had all these access databases that propped up in organizations because people sort of knew how to code them and they were useful, and then they stored them on a file system, and they may or may not have been backed up, but they actually became part of their critical infrastructure. And we don't want to have the same thing happen with these easy to use, as Ranjit said, these no code slash low code tools that are available to people. So if you're even considering sneaking in a product like this, and there are plenty around, we've been promoting citizen development or low code tools for many years, and we've got lots of our other competitors that are doing the same things. But if you're thinking of sneaking it in underneath the radar and IT doesn't know about it, then you're probably asking for a bit of trouble. So what you'd want to do is to use these tools to deliver your solutions, but you really want to do that with the blessing of IT, because ultimately IT is still in charge of backups, they're still in charge of security, they're still in charge of release management and maintenance. And if they don't know about it, then they're going to be slightly annoyed when suddenly they have this mess to clean up. So the best examples that I've seen with our customers is that IT is involved. They might not be the business owner, right? It could have been HR department that's decided that they want to use this product set, but they have involved IT in the procurement process so that IT have a governance framework and all that structure and discipline that IT are really good for that they can put over the top of that to make sure that it's going to be a success.
Yeah, in fact, that is what I've seen in Singapore as well, Dan, because we do have some of these large enterprises who do have their own center of excellence team. Yes, the difference is that the initial conversation, the IT and the procurement is not allowed, or maybe they are not involved. The business owners would go and look for tools. They would look at the options that they are looking for, and then they would do the initial proof of concept and so on. And then towards the end, there is a discussion that goes with the security team to ensure that the product is the right fit in their technology stack. So yeah, but without that, I think, as Crispin said, they would be inviting a lot of trouble, and I don't think that's going to work out on many of the organizations.
Do you feel
I
that?
was talking to a CIO about this, Stolly, and
Yeah,
I asked her, what do you think about these citizen developer tools? Does that encourage things like shadow IT? And she said, I take a different approach. I really, number one, I love it because it is taking a lot of the workload away from my direct team and my developers. So if I can distribute that in a controlled fashion, that's awesome. But the
Mhm.
number one thing that she's concerned about is security. So
Yeah,
she wants to make sure that the people are using the tools appropriately and are not doing silly things with her data. But the only way to really control that is to have IT help you set up those data connections and those permissions in the first place so that they're aware of it, and then they can allow or disallow certain people within the organizations to use those different types of data connections. So she was really happy with the what the tools enabled her organization to do, but she definitely wanted that structure over the top of it, to
right.
make sure that everything was safe, so you don't make the front page of the newspaper.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Now, with that being said, and I like her approach to it, and I guess looking from the flip side of her approach would be where it's a lot more structured and gated, and the citizen developer isn't being enabled with the tools that they need to be able to do the job. They have a preset of tools that they may have, um, and they're sort of stuck, trying to squeeze that round peg into a square hole. Do you feel that that would, and I've seen this, multiple times over the course of my career, where you've been given a set of tools and you're in that swim lane, and that's kind of what you've got to use. Do you feel that innovation and I guess rapid solution deployment is the trade-off for that? Not being able to, I
Let
guess
Um,
me
what
go.
I'm trying to say is not being able to innovate because you can't use the best of breed, or you're not able to do these three you know super cool things that are relatively new because you're stuck with tools that were purchased 5 years ago or something along those lines.
I guess it
In fact,
depends on the
probably that
products that
is
you've
one
got.
of the reasons. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, no, you go, Ranjit.
Okay, so in fact, I think that was probably one of the reasons why there was this role that came up. When we talk to some of our customers, they say that if they want something to be automated, at times they have to wait for months together because there is some kind of a tender coming out soon, and the procurement wants to put things together. They don't want to have multiple releases, so on and so forth. And I think there is a motion to maximize the digital dexterity, as they call it, or when it comes to the digital transformation bandwagon, to use everything in their hands to just put together and build a solution that works well for them. So my take is that probably when we talk to customer, 80% of the requirements does not require that kind of involvement of IT or security, for which they have to wait for days together for to get something automated. Possibly in 8 or 9 months time, by the time they get the tool, that requirement is gone or it's changed, and then they have to go through that entire motion of change request and so on. So if they have something like this, you know they could probably categorize the requirement. If it is something which does not require or which does not have a whole lot of complexity, they could go with the citizen developer. Or if they feel that there is something for which which is more like an organization wide, touching different enterprise applications, you need to have a lot of security in place, then probably look into the technology stack and go with one what has already been shortlisted by the IT.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Now we
think
had. Sorry, go.
in that respect, it's what tools are you given and what are the capability of the tools, because some citizen developed tools, they're very easy to use, but they're quite limited in their functionality. So if that's all you've been given, then you can only do so much with it, and your organization might be okay with that, because the harder things, they might use some other technology. I'd like to think for us at Nintex, we've got a really broad offering so that our customers are able to do a whole bunch of different things, so they're easy to use, but they're also really powerful. But also, it's like, it's what you know. So if you talk to an RPA vendor about automation, the answer is always going to be RPA. If you talk to a workflow vendor about automation, the answer is always going to be workflow. And we don't like to have those conversations. We like to use the appropriate tools, um, as you have them. And sometimes a
Yeah.
citizen developer tool may not be the appropriate tool for your really, really advanced, complex logic. Then maybe that is back to your bespoke development, or an off-the-shelf package to do something specific.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, Julian raised a great question in terms of infosec and scalability. Now, these are, I guess, common terms for us, right, in the IT world. But to a citizen developer who may be a business analyst in the finance team, infosec and infosec's probably just that questionnaire they do once a year for company compliance, and scalability is probably completely lost on them. How do you think best an organization should tackle some of these things in terms of, hey, we're going to go down this route of enabling our users with all these great tools to be able to take the load off IT, to build out these great processes and solutions within the organization. But how do we best train them in things that are very IT specific, like InfoSec and scalability and governance to that point? Is it a case of, hey, introducing yearly training courses like you have to do with human resources and things like that? Or what are, I guess, some examples that you've seen out there?
I think there
And
should be a process, Dan. So, some of the organizations that we've been talking to, they have this entire process to set up this citizen development team. So it's like, first and foremost, they would go and identify the right candidate who has got the right mindset. Because I've seen people, once they do a workshop, they are all excited. They just want to go and automate everything that they're doing, but that may not be right, because if there is no right security in place, if the right amount of validations are not put in, it may probably backfire. So I've seen this company where what they do is they go and find the right candidates. These candidates are given training on the tool that they would want to work on. Instead of going a full bank approach, they would pick the two minimum viable products or the processes that they would want to automate. They would get the feedback and slowly they would start scaling. So I feel that is the right approach, because if you do this, then you can be kind of rest assured that you would not be going in the wrong direction, or you would not have processes which no one is using, or it's never been maintained, or it's not modified, or so on.
Right. So more of a calculated and measured
Yeah.
approach as opposed to, hey, have at it.
Yeah.
yeah, otherwise you're going to get anarchy as well, because you'll have all these people designing different solutions and they'll have no structured way of designing them. And they might even have duplicates. You might have a duplicate process that's been repeated. So actually, there's an organization based where Ranjit is that has a really nice framework. I really like the way they approach this. When somebody has an idea for automation, it goes to the classics, right? So you need to understand the process first,
Yeah.
and then you say, is this a viable candidate for automation? Is the return on investment okay? If you tick those two boxes, then that organization actually gives that person who submitted the idea the opportunity to automate it themselves. And if they are of that ilk, then they will. But what they do is they put them on training courses first. Like citizen developer tools are easy to use, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody can use them. So they do put them on a training course that gives them the fundamentals about how to build out a solution. They
Right.
release their candidate, it still gets quality assured via somebody in IT who does the testing, who makes sure that this is a scalable solution, for the appropriate type of project that it is scalable, security measures are met and such things like that. And then they release it. Um,
Yeah.
so, one, it's distributing the workload. But number two, it's putting that nice framework and governance in place to make sure that it's not just a random pick and mix.
Yeah, and Paul in the comments makes a really good point in terms of, it's really not about the tools or the applications. It's about having the citizen developers having that design mindset of how do you build a solution, or whether it be automation or data entry or a bot for RPA or whatever it might be, right? Like having the knowledge of not putting in a recursive loop that just goes around and round and round in circles forever. Like if you're not familiar with how processes flow, for example, how do you know not to design those things? So I guess you're not going to go off and give design thinking training to hundreds of people across an organization. What would be a couple of ways, I guess, you could implement those types of things? Would you, I guess, on your point, Ranjit, where that more of a controlled, measured approach with those people that you've identified as, say, the process champions or the application or solution champions for the low code tools, would be part of that training be just around, hey, how do you go about thinking about planning what you're going to build? So before you go off into solution mode, and I know personally, I do this in my everyday life. I'm going to go build a play set for my kids. I just go to the store and buy a heap of stuff and start building. I don't plan it at all. I'm terrible. But over the course of time in my professional life, when I go to build a workflow or automation now, I will sit down and I'll plan it out and I'll think about it before I actually build it. But very much in the beginning, I would just go at it and spend a whole lot of time building before thinking about it. So how do we get that thought process into our citizen developers so they can build better solutions?
I think continuous training is the key, because if they don't know what are the new features coming in the product that they have already bought in, uh, probably they would never learn to do it better. They would be doing it, maybe the wrong way that they've been doing it for a very long time, and they would just continue doing that. Also, what I feel is important is the continuous improvement. So you need to monitor. Let's say, for example, we have these features in Nintex, which kinds of tells you how many workflows have been published, how many are being used, or the number of workflow which are just lying idle. So probably the one it's I think it's always important to have one owner who would have the entire ownership of ensuring that the resources are used to the fullest. Probably they will have to run reports, look at what is going wrong, who's not doing it right, and then pull them into the right training and so on. uh, this is possibly one way of doing it, to ensure that the ones who are making the workflow, they are fully aware of the new features, they are doing it correctly, and also whatever is being published is used. Let's say, for example, if you have 800 workflows and we're just using 20 of them, it just doesn't make sense. So it would rather be advisable to have a word with them and to understand what was the notion, why was it published, and so on. In fact, a very interesting conversation that I had with a customer, when we asked them the same question, that you have 200 workflows but you're using only 30. So for them it was like they had published one, they felt it's not working right, they just created a new one. They never bothered to go and make changes in the published version. So yeah, so that's something which I think someone more technical will have to guide them, will have to teach them that this is the right way of doing it.
Right. Now, another Paul in the comments has brought up an interesting question as well, and I think this is sort of an evolution of how this has all gone about, where once upon a time you had a team of developers who built all the solutions in an organization. And then you had sort of the rise of these low code, no code tools where you would see professionals who specialized in these tools take over some of those tasks of building out solutions, whether it be in, Salesforce or SharePoint or in Box or whatever, platform it might have been, CRM. And now we're starting to see all these, centers of excellence within organizations. That's, it's a team of specialized folk who, look at process management, project management, solution building using low code tools, all those kinds of things. My thought would be I think we'll see the next evolution where those teams won't necessarily dissolve or go away. They'll become the thought leaders within an organization and will be responsible for those citizen developers with training and ensuring they've got that system design mindset and things along those lines. So instead of like the centers of excellence disappearing per se, I actually see them expanding in the roles and focus of what they actually do within an organization. Is that kind of where your head's at as well, or something different?
Yeah, I agree with you. And hello, Paul, who asked that question. Good to see you, my friend. Um, I think there are a few different schools of thought on this one. One of them is that you have a process champion in each department, and they're the go-to person. It's the train the trainer approach. The other one is the center of excellence, where potentially some of these lead people get together and the developing solutions across the entire organization. I think both are equally valid. But I think there is a place to go where you need to get that thought leadership and that mentoring and everything else like that. So I see that role actually evolving. But I think the difference today is that it's not necessarily 100% IT. In the past, it might have been 100% IT, but now it's a group of like-minded individuals who are interested in automating solutions and have got the ability to do that and to help others out. A couple of points from earlier as well is that I think a good place to start is also to do the old start small. So it's don't tackle your most complex process first because you're using these easy to use tools. You still need to learn. So start small and build up your knowledge. And the other point I think that Julian made as well about the security and other things like that. It's we can also protect people because they might be their own worst enemies. So if your tool allows you to do dangerous things, for example, in our automation tool, we can go and create a new Active Directory user. You don't want to give that action to everybody. So you can set it up so that you're protecting people as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with I guess now I've lost my train of thought, but it was on the. I mean, we're talking about the evolution of centers of excellence, within organizations, but I still think we're seeing organizations not even at that point yet, right? Like, I think when COVID came around, there was very much a very rapid change in how IT works across organizations by supporting people at home. The VPN market blew up, Zoom blew up, all these sorts of things. It was like, okay, now how do we do all this kind of stuff? I can't just print this thing out and go and give it to Bob down the hallway to sign. I need a process. And I still think quite a lot of organizations are still grappling with that stuff, right? From the day to day, small automation problems to quite large, complex customer facing things that require service buses and all kinds of integrations. What would be if you were to have a chat with a bloke in a bar over a beer and he was saying, Chris Ranjit, mate, my organization's just upgraded from Windows XP and we're trying to work from home. We've got thousands of processes that we just don't know where to start. What should be the first thing we do?
I think
My
first.
one
Go ahead,
is
Chris.
understand your processes first before you throw any technology at it. If you don't understand your processes, it's going to be pretty hard to go and automate them. I'm not saying, like, there are going to be obviously some real standout candidates that you might be able to automate straight away, but if you understand your processes as they stand and understand where the pain points are and potentially opportunities for improvement, then that's going to put you in the right direction. Because also you might have lots of different candidates, and then you need to pick your battles. Which one am I going to get the biggest bang for the buck? So my first piece of advice is understand your processes.
Absolutely in line with Chris Ben. So that is probably the most important stuff where they put things together. They look at what kind of return on investment they can get by automating a particular process. But it could also mean that the one that is going to yield maximum ROI is the most complex one, and they would probably take months and months to automate that. So then that may not be the right candidate. So there would be various factors that they need to look into. Uh, and then probably come with the minimum viable product, which would also tell them that the technology that they're going for is the right fit for the organization and so on, and then take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah, so lots to chew on. So we've got a question here. Let me from Mike. Let me read. I don't know if Chris, if you read that. I was just let me.
This is one of the major attributes of RPA today. No need for Python.
And I guess quickly while you guys are reading that, Chris, in terms of what are some of the incentives? Well, I guess the old incentives for the IT folk was easy. It was send them to a conference or a training course and give them a T-shirt and a water bottle. But I don't think that's probably going to fly in some of the other departments, mate. And conferences aren't really happening at the moment. Well, they're starting to come back. So that's quite an interesting question. What sort of incentives can an organization give to a citizen developer to become that go-to person within an organization? Yes, you will have a good handful of folk who want to because they want to evolve, they want to learn, they want to try something different outside of the norm. But this sun is crazy.
You've got a halo.
I mean, I live in Seattle, and the sun's been behind a cloud all day, and now it's just decided to come out. But what I guess financial remuneration might be something. What have you guys seen anything in terms of incentives given to, I guess, citizen developers to sort of go that extra yard?
I think people almost self-select. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. So I'm less inclined to offer incentives for citizen development. The one of the reasons why people get into it is because they are benefiting their own jobs. They are automating a task that they would otherwise have to do manually. And so they can see that by putting it through a citizen development tool, that they have suddenly now freed up time in their day. But they've chosen to do that themselves instead of asking somebody else to build it for them, because they might want to expand their knowledge. They might want to have a little bit of variety in their jobs. And I've seen actually some people that have started that way, and then as their knowledge grows, they've taken on more and more of a senior role inside citizen development and actually had a career change. But I think that it's more personal selection if I wanted to become a citizen developer rather than my boss encouraging me to do it.
Yeah, that's fair. It's
Yeah.
I've actually got nothing now. That's exactly how I would answer that. All right, guys. Well, we've this is the longest ever Process Pros. We've had quite a number of things come up, which has been fantastic. We might have a follow-up session on Sit Dev and go from there, and maybe build out some resources in terms of things we can share with folks in terms of worksheets and check sheets, and maybe there's an opening up in the market for training for organizations for citizen developers around design mindsets. That would be quite nice.
Totally. Sorry, Stolly, we didn't answer Mike's question.
Right.
So
Yep.
if I was just going to summarize that, Mike has basically said, sorry, I'm paraphrasing you here, Mike, in the traditional world where you might have had to develop, then you had some costs of the development, right? So it takes some time to develop a solution, and there are costs associated with that, salaries and other things like that. Whereas with the citizen development tools, you've got to pay for those tools up front, right? So you might have a higher cost right at the beginning because you're buying those tools, but then over time, because they are so quick to use and develop with, that your actual cost to implement each process is lower. So it's kind of balancing up where your costs occur. But I always go back to, you've still got to justify why you're automating a particular process. If the numbers don't stack up, and that includes the time it takes to develop it with whatever tool you're using, and also the licensing costs, if they don't stack up, then don't do it.
Yeah, and absolutely, it's a case of what you were saying before too. It's about understanding your processes, right? Like very often you'll come in with a new solution, and not a $5 a month, for 100 users type, buy this with your credit card solution, but a low code solution such as an Nintex, or it could be a UI path, or whatever, right? Some companies get sticker shock when they see, oh, we're going to pay how much
Yeah.
for this per year. But then on the flip side, you'll see other organizations that understand their processes. They know what their processes are worth because they've done the planning, they've looked at it. They can see that by automating or building something that reduces some or X amount of people's time by X amount of hours per day over the course of a year, at the end of the day, will save, eight 8x on whatever the no code tool will be, and it becomes a very different discussion at that point, right? Especially you guys doing pre-sales, do you come across those things often? I mean, it used to happen all the time when I was in pre-sales, when you'd come across an informed buyer and an uninformed buyer who is just looking at kicking the tires and tools and stuff.
Yes, we do. In fact, most of the times, probably it's more like a sales discussion. Even if they do understand, they would come back and they would talk about the cost, and they would try and compare with the tools in the market. As you said, you do have $5 per user, or $5 for the entire organization tools as well. But I think when we do a bit of proof of concept, when we try and show them how this is going to change the way they work, many a times then it just becomes a lot more easier. What we also kind of do is, we pick those processes which runs the most. So if there is something which is running only maybe once or thrice in a year, there is no point going for the automation for those processes. So the way we kind of put things on the table is, these are the features that you're going to get, this is the time that you're spending now, this is what could happen if you don't have these validations and rules in place, you could be at stake. Then it becomes a lot more easier. But yes, we do have a lot of discussions. We do have both the types of audiences who come and ask, why this kind of a pricing, and why can't you sell cheaper when there are so many other products in the market who are cheaper than you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. One last question before we wrap this up. Another one from Paul. With citizen developers on the rise, do you find that the buyers are the actual line of business owners, or is it still IT? And how does IT fit into that buying cycle? And I think this sort of wraps up to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? Around
Yeah.
that shadow IT. And yes, it is kind of happening, but it's not such a great idea to do it without acknowledging IT, or sort of bringing IT along for the journey, right? Hopefully you shouldn't have to get their blessing. IT should be encouraging the organization to innovate and to explore tools that will benefit the organization. But obviously you want them on board with whatever you want them to do, right? So how do you guys normally see IT as part of the buying cycle? Is it more of a case of, hey, as long as we get IT's blessing as part of that buying cycle, the person actually purchasing the product is from a particular department, not from the IT department?
I think if I just think about to my customer interactions, I am probably running presentations more to line of business owners rather than directly IT. in some respects, IT already get this. They already understand the power of these types of tools, so they're comfortable with it. So the people that I'm presenting to usually be a line of business, but in how does IT fit into the buying cycle? They have to be involved. They need to sign off on it because ultimately they're still going to be responsible for this tool.
Yeah, yeah, and I've certainly found that as well too, where IT's all across it. It's normally though IT normally have to get the business person on side because it's the business person with the budget.
True.
IT
And I
wants the
think
tool and know what they can do with the tools, but they don't have the budget to go and buy the
yeah,
tools.
I think one of the major concerns that they also have is what would be the kind of effort that they have to put in if they buy a tool. So yeah, that is also one of the factors that they look into. So what is going to be managed by IT and what will be managed by the line of business. So as
Yeah,
long as there is a balance in that, I think they're okay with it.
yeah. How low code is this
Yeah.
thing? Yeah, yeah. Awesome. All right, guys, this has been fantastic. We'll definitely have to have a follow up on this chat. For more info on these guys, follow them on LinkedIn, on Twitter, all that kind of good stuff. I know Chris, you're on Twitter. You probably don't use it that very much, I don't think. And Ranjit, I don't even know. Do you use the tweets? You're a
No.
serial tweeter. No.
That's
But until next time, see you
right.
later.
See you.
Bye.
See you all.
Bye.